Hey, friends. This is Martine Williams, and I am obsessed with all things mompreneur life and helping you to remix your priorities, your habits, your mindsets, and yes, even your relationships so that you can build a successful business without losing yourself in the process. I'm also obsessed with the color turquoise and lyrics of the 80s and 90s, but that's beside the point. Girlfriend, you don't have to hustle 24/7, 365 and continue to sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your sanity to be a successful mompreneur. As a small town girl living in a lonely world to a six-figure mompreneur, I am here to teach you how. There is a better way, and this podcast is your one-stop shop for all of the how-tos, the encouragement, the life hacks, the success tips, and of course, a little side of tough love. This is the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So let's do this. Well, hey, friends, and welcome back to the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. This is Martine Williams, your host and CEO, Chief Encouragement Officer. Happy December. I cannot believe it's December and we have 1 month left of this year. It's been an incredible year, a very challenging year for me personally and professionally. And I'm probably going to do a complete episode just on that topic and on the year. Those of you that have followed me through this journey from this time last year till now, like you understand, you know what's transpired, and just you've been along the journey with me. And I'm so thankful for you, for the support and the constant encouragement on my journey. But today, I wanted to talk to you about the topic of guilt, because this came up as, you know, November is my theme, November. And we talked a lot about in those episodes how to say no and the power of no and all of those things wrapped around that word no. And actually had a couple of you ask a further question with, okay, so now I've said no, but the guilt, like, how do I not feel guilty when I say no? And so I'm actually kind of shocked that I have not talked about this on a previous episode, and I actually went back to look to see, because it is a section in my course that I designed 3 years ago called Choose You. I'm not sure if you're even familiar that I have a course out there. It's not really live. It's not something I'm promoting right now, especially as I'm kind of going through a rebranding phase. But one of the modules in that course is how to kick the guilt. And I thought for sure I talked about it here on the episode, but I guess I haven't, because I haven't seen it. So this one is for you if you struggle with guilt. And I want to start out by just sharing with you the definition of what guilt is. So guilt is a cognitive or emotional experience that occurs when a person believes or realizes accurately or not, that she has compromised her own standards of conduct or has violated a moral standard and bears a significant responsibility for that violation. Now, that's a long definition of what guilt is, and you can find some shorter ones for sure. But what I loved about that specific definition of guilt is that it hits on two things. It hits on a person's beliefs, and it hits on whether it's accurate or not. And I can just speak from my own experience and the coaching clients that I have walked that journey with, that a lot of the time our guilt it's not accurate. And it's based on the beliefs that we have about ourselves or the beliefs that other people are putting on us. And so just a stat that came up as I was researching this topic of guilt was that 51% of women report losing sleep over guilt. 51%. That is pretty remarkable, friends. And so it's definitely a topic that we want to cover. And I hope that this will help you. This is not something where I'm like, oh, I never experienced guilt anymore. I've learned, I'm an expert at it. It is something that continues to creep in. And that's why it's a question to ask every single one of my Turquoise Talk guests, because I want to hear their stories. I want to hear how they've overcome mom guilt. And that's, you know, a specific type of guilt, but where is your guilt rooted? You know, research states that there are 3 kinds of guilt. There's misplaced guilt, which is feeling guilt for things you didn't actually do. Appropriate guilt, which is feeling guilty for things you did do. We're not perfect. We do make mistakes. And the third one is guilt brought on by other people to get you to do what they want you to do. So it's kind of like a manipulation, right? Tactic is the guilt bombers. And I'm super excited about a guest that I have coming on the show this month. Y'all, the Turquoise Talk guests that I have for this month are going to blow you away. And one of them specifically is going to be talking to you about guilt bombers. And so I'm really excited for that. So toxic guilt is a type of guilt that no longer motivates you to make positive changes. And a study suggests that with toxic guilt, you can actually end up feeling bad about yourself as a whole versus just feeling remorseful for your behavior, right? Like you did something and you feel remorseful for it. But when you have toxic guilt, and I do believe a lot of mompreneurs are living with a toxic state of guilt, is that you start attaching your identity and you feel bad about your entire identity instead of just the behavior that maybe you did or you didn't do. It's a major influence. Toxic guilt can be a major influence in the decision-making process. And we become driven by guilt versus facts when you have toxic guilt. And if that's you, maybe it's something you need to go talk to a professional about. Maybe there's some deep-rooted depression or anxiety or other things that are going on from a mental wellness standpoint or illness standpoint that you need to get professional help with. And let me be the first to say, do that if that's where you're at. So for the purposes of this podcast, we're going to be talking about not specifically toxic guilt, but just the other three that I was talking about. So some questions to ask yourself about guilt is, did you actually do something wrong, or is it just perceived as doing something wrong? Like think back to the last thing you felt guilty about or felt guilt over. Did you actually do something wrong, or is it just perceived as doing something wrong by someone else, by the expectations of someone else? Maybe it's perceived by you, but it's just a warped thinking. Is it coming from someone else? Is there a guilt bomber who just keeps showing up in your life, especially this time of year? What about the situation is making you feel guilty? So what is it about that particular situation that guilt is rising up in you? And is there anything you can do to change the outcome? Like, is this something you can control, or is it something you can't control that you can't do anything about? So just some questions, and I hope you're going to write those down. And so now we've asked the question, maybe you've thought about, okay, what kind of guilt am I actually dealing with? Which kind do I deal with the most? And listen, it may flow out all throughout three of them, right? You may have seasons of misplaced guilt. You may have seasons of appropriate guilt, which we need to apologize when we do things that are not right. And maybe you have seasons of guilt bombers. And I do feel like the holidays is a big season for those guilt bombers who try to manipulate you to do what they want you to do. It just shows its ugly head, I think, in the holidays. So anyway, so how do we deal with the guilt? Like when it comes your way, this was the question that came to me. Okay, I've said no. Now, how do I deal with the guilt when it comes? And this could be related to anything, not just saying no. But the first thing is, don't sweep it under the rug. Like, don't just throw it under the rug and act like it's not there. Acknowledge it so you can deal with it appropriately. Again, if this is a toxic behavior that keeps coming up for you, maybe you need to go see a therapist. Maybe you just need to talk to a friend and say, this just keeps coming up. And can you help me figure out, am I wrong here? I am, one of my friends said to me, actually, one of my mentors said to me, she's like, you are so good about seeking out wisdom and seeking out counsel, trying to keep yourself honest and keep what you're doing honest and just asking for the help that you need. And so maybe it is a friend, maybe it's a mentor, but don't sweep it under the rug. Acknowledge it so you can deal with it. And that tip can go for a lot of things, right? Don't sweep it under the rug when you're upset with your spouse. It's going to show its ugly head at some point. So just acknowledge it and then deal with it appropriately. Okay, number 2 is shut down the inner critic and turn it into an inner coach, reminding you that your behavior doesn't have to define you. So this is where having the appropriate ammunition to fight the battle. This is where that's important. So what is your ammunition to fight back against that inner critic that is there? And how can you turn her into your inner coach? And for me, it's having that ammunition. So what can I say back to that inner critic? Number 1 is that, verses of scripture. I definitely have those truths in my head and in my mind that I can talk back to myself, to my inner critic, and say, that's not what God says about me. That's what you're saying about me, but that's not what God says about me. Maybe you need to write out like 10 affirmations that are truth that you either get from God's word or you get them from, people that love you the most and can see the amazing person that you are. And you just need to be able to have that ammunition to speak back to your inner critic. Prayer is another way that I help, when I'm starting to feel some of that inner critic showing up, I return to the place where I can get my source of strength and clarity and take that thought captive, right? So shut down the inner critic as quickly as possible. And this is something that if you're not used to doing, it may take you some time to do it. You might even want to keep a little notebook next to you to write down, okay, what is this critic saying? And then fact check it. Just like we fact check things that come through our email or on social media. Like just because it's on social media doesn't mean it's true, right? Just because you're thinking it doesn't mean that it's true. So fact check that and decide, is this truth or is this just a feeling that's coming through right now in this moment? Okay. Is it misplaced guilt? So this is number 3, how to deal with your guilt. Is it misplaced guilt? Like, ask those who you feel guilty for, like how they're feeling. And an example to give you here is one of my biggest sources of guilt has been mom guilt. As a entrepreneur who has built a very successful business, working, from home, and the kids being at home, seeing me work. My husband was gone during the day, working his job, the same amount of hours, but he was out of sight, out of mind. So they didn't expect him to be their playmate all the time, right? But they saw me here and they just, that's what they thought. Well, mom's home, so mom should be spending her time with me. So mom guilt was something I really had to work through. And one of the pieces of advice that was given to me at that time was, really, have you sat down with your kids and like actually asked them what's most important to them? So I was raised with an incredible mom who worked a 9-to-5 job and had dinner on the table at 6:00 every night. And it wasn't just like a casserole every night. I mean, it was like potatoes or rice and gravy, pork chops, green beans, like all the things in a meal. So she got home at 5, or, we get home about 5:30, and then she would have dinner on the table at 6:30. I don't know how she did it. And so I had an enormous amount of guilt to live up to that expectation. And so by having the conversation with my kids and actually finding out, okay, is it important to you that I actually cook the meals? And I had to ask myself these questions too. Like, is it really that important that I do the cooking? I can answer that in like 2.2 seconds. No, I don't want to cook. It's not something I find joy in, but it was really important to me that we sat around the table as a family. And that was something that we did as a family, myself growing up. And it was a tradition that I wanted to carry over into my family. So that part was important to me. But really asking my kids, is it important to you that I do the cooking, or can we go out to dinner, or can we have it takeout, or just how important? And they really could care less. I found out they really could care less. Is it important to you that I'm at all of your practices and all the games, or is it just important to you that I'm at the games? So just, having those conversations with your kids and asking them what's really important to them will help remove some of that misplaced guilt that we put on ourselves because it's what we see other moms doing, or it's what our mother did, or our grandmother did, or you fill in the blank there. But sometimes, for me, a lot of times it was misplaced guilt and it wasn't appropriate. So have those conversations with your kids, with your spouse, with the people that are important to you that you're feeling the guilt with, because they're probably not feeling as bad as you are about it. And so it's misplaced. Okay. The 4th thing is have evidence. And this was another great tip that came to me from a mentor who she was actually here on the show in another episode. But I was, struggling with the mom guilt, and she has kids, and she's, had a successful business with kids. And like, how do you do it? Like, what? I don't understand. Like, I have my ammunition. I know what God says about me, and I'm speaking that, but I'm still struggling with it. And she said, do you have evidence? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, do you have evidence? So just like you have ammunition to fight back, you also need evidence of what is truth. Like making a list of all the great things you are doing for others, that you are doing with the kids, the time you are spending with the kids. Evidence, by definition, is a visible sign of something indicating whether a belief or a proposition is true or valid. So do you have evidence? Do you need the evidence? Will that help you with your guilt if you had evidence that you spent enough time with the kids? Or is it evidence that you've spent enough time working so you can actually put it down for the day? Maybe it's evidence that you've spent time with your spouse, that you've completed the most important tasks around the house. If you're a list checker, this is probably why you love having your checklist, because it gives you the confidence and the evidence that you actually did do something important today. Even though your worth and value is not based on your checklist and your to-do list and whether you completed them or not, I want to make sure I'm really clear about that. It does help on those moments of guilt when you feel like what I did didn't matter, or I didn't spend enough time working, so now I need to work through dinner time and quality time with my family. Or, I didn't spend enough time with the kids, so I'm just not going to do those important things in my business today because I need to. So we just swing the pendulum to extremes, and having the evidence really helps. So evidence that you helped that friend, maybe there's a friend that is placing guilt on you because you're not spending more time with them, or you're not helping them in this situation when really you just spent, 2 or 3 hours on the phone with them, helping them with the situation. So I don't know what kind of evidence you need, but that is definitely a tool in your tool belt when it comes to kicking the guilt. Okay. Number 5 is know that self-care isn't selfish. Like, you have needs too. And you can't be everything to everyone and nothing to yourself. Your needs are valid. And I've done episode after episode on this topic. So if you're feeling guilty or selfish because of self-care, you definitely want to go back and listen to one of those episodes. But just know that it's not selfish and that your needs matter too. Number 6, how to kick the guilt is setting healthy boundaries and communicate them. So we can't just set the boundaries and not communicate them appropriately to the people that it matters to, because then that's like expecting them to read your mind, right? Guilt sometimes comes from those unclear expectations. We haven't told people how to treat us. We haven't told people what we're going to allow and what we're not going to allow. And so when we haven't communicated that boundary and then they want to infringe on the boundary, we feel guilty when we follow through on that boundary because we haven't appropriately set that boundary. And the holidays is a big time to do this, because there may be some traditions and things that you have as a family or that you want to have as a family. And I'm so sorry if you can hear my dog in the background. He's decided to scratch his back on the carpet. But if you haven't clearly defined, okay, this is what my Christmas day is going to look like, this is how my family is going to celebrate Christmas, this is what we're going to do and we're not going to do, then it's hard on both sides. Those people who are used to the traditions and the things that you've always done, it's hard for them to accept that because they don't understand it. So communicate it. Not that you have to explain it away, but just letting them know, hey, this is a new tradition. This is what we're going to do as a family. And this is the expectation. Okay, number 7, say you're sorry when needed. Like, just go ahead and apologize. Again, guilt sometimes is there for a reason, because we didn't behave, at the standard that we have personally, our moral compass or our values. Like, maybe we had a bad day and we just, lashed out at our children or our spouse or someone else. Like, say you're sorry when needed. Guilt isn't always bad, in that it will lead us to apologize again when our behavior was just not up to our values and our standards. So instead of stewing over it and feeling yourself guilty and literally beating yourself down for days upon days, forgive yourself and say you're sorry as soon as possible. They may not accept your apology. That's on them at that point. You've done what you're supposed to do, which is to say that you're sorry and ask for forgiveness. And that's up to them. They can carry that unforgiveness in their heart and it's going to make them sick, but just say you're sorry. Okay. Number 8, get help if you're experiencing mental health challenges that your guilt can be stemming from. So I mentioned this in the beginning. If this is becoming toxic for you and it's something you're dealing with every single day, every moment of the day, I really challenge you to go see someone who can help you, because guilt should have no place in your life other than correcting us when we're wrong. Like misplaced guilt, toxic guilt, guilt bombers, it really adds to burnout. It adds to physical illnesses, mental illnesses. And so address it. Don't sweep it under the rug. Get the help that you need from a professional who can walk you through it. I'm not the professional when it comes to that. Okay. Number 9, believe that you are making progress and not striving for perfection. We can feel guilty if your standard is perfection. If you actually, and this is another piece that was in, that is in the Choose You course. Have you even written out or put pictures of the woman, the wife, the mother, the sister, the daughter that you desire to be? What does she even look like? Or are you just striving for perfection? Because if you're striving for perfection, I can guarantee you guilt is going to live in your life for a very long time, because perfection is a lie. There is no such thing as perfection. It's all about progress. And you're going to get it wrong some days, right? As a wife, a mother, a daughter, a friend, and that's okay. Perfection is not the goal. Perfectionism kind of creates this pace of doing more and more and thinking that we can make it perfect. But perfection is unrealistic, so it doesn't happen. And then we just do more. It's a vicious cycle, friends. And guilt is all wrapped up in there. So just believe that you're making progress. And if you're not making progress, there are people out there who can walk the journey and help you get progress, whether it be a coach, a mentor, a therapist, a friend. There are people out there who can help you make that progress, help you to see your blind spots, and who will help you not to strive for perfection. If they're trying to make you perfect, get another friend, get another coach, get another mentor, because that's just going to take you down, spiral you down into burnout. But just remember, believe that you're making progress and don't strive for perfection. All right, number 10 for helping kick the guilt, and I mentioned this earlier, and I need to repeat it again, is forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for maybe the behaviors that weren't how you want to show up in your life, in your business, in your family. Forgive yourself for the mindsets of not believing that you're capable to design a life that you love. Forgive yourself for the expectations that you have set on yourself that are unrealistic. Forgive yourself for trying to live up to the expectations of others. Just forgive yourself, because that's where a lot of the guilt is coming in from as well. Forgive yourself and move on as quickly as possible. And that's easier said than done on a lot of days. And to the extent of the behavior that came from making a decision, right, wrong, or indifferent, I understand that could be a hard thing for many of you listening today. But again, there are people who can walk you through that. There are people who can help you. So those are just some quick, not all easy, but ways that I've addressed guilt, that people have coached me through guilt, whether it's mom guilt, whether it's daughter guilt. And there's just a lot to be said for this topic. And again, it's why I ask each Turquoise Talk this question, because I think it's important for us to continue to talk about. So that it may be one of these 10 that finally clicks for you. Maybe it's a conversation I've had with somebody else and it finally clicks for you. But friend, guilt has no place in your life long term, and it will make you sick, just like unforgiveness will make you sick. Guilt will make you sick. I don't know if you've read the book, The Body Keeps Score, but there's a lot of things that we're dealing with emotionally that are making us sick. And that step number 1 is real important. Don't sweep it under the rug. Deal with it, and deal with it as quickly as you can and appropriately. All right. So this month we have rock stars from all different genres, all different topics. This is not like November was, all about November. December is just, I have just been brave and courageous and asked people to come on the podcast that have inspired me, who have challenged me. And for whatever reason, they're all kind of falling into this 1 month and into January. So I'm super excited for y'all to hear from the Turquoise Talk guest. And I will be giving you some updates probably in January. I'll be ready to give you some updates on what's going on with me professionally and just kind of reflect back on this year and what my biggest lessons were. Because, I'm all about sharing the journey with you. I don't necessarily always felt led to share the journey when I'm in the middle of the muck and the mud, because is that really helping you? I don't know. I've shared some of that with you, but I get super excited about sharing when I'm on the other side and can really help pull you through the muck and the mud. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for following the show, for continuing to support it by sharing it. I'd really love for you to leave a review for the show. That would just be the best Christmas gift you could give me, is your words in a review for the show. All right. I will be catching you on the next episode, and y'all know I'm believing in you always. Catch you later. Well, that's a wrap, friends, for this week's episode of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for following the show. It means so much to me. And listen, friend, sharing is caring. So if you loved this episode and thought of some fellow mompreneurs who could benefit, send them the link. Share this episode or take a screenshot and head on over to Instagram and share and tag me at Martine31Williams. We are connected on Instagram, right? It's where you will get all the fun behind the scenes of my life and business as a mompreneur. Until next time, know that I am believing in you always.